Hey, this is attorney Elizabeth Potts-Weinstein, and we're going to be talking today about why do your trademark applications keep getting denied or refused by the United States Patent and Trademark Office. So I've encountered people both in the comments on this channel as well as clients who keep filing trademark applications on different ideas and keep getting rejected. Sometimes it's businesses they already run, and sometimes it's just ideas for businesses that they plan to run. But they're not getting approved. So what is going on? Now, sometimes these are logistical problems. So I've seen sometimes where people aren't filling out the form correctly, and I mean literally with stuff like the name of the owner, the address, your email, this kind of stuff. You have to provide this information, otherwise it's not a valid application. You have to give your address, your mailing address and your domicile address, which is your actual location. You have to put an email address in there. These are things that just have to be done, and if you're not willing to do that, you don't get to file a trademark application, is the answer. Sometimes it's because they're never putting things in the right class. Now, typically, if you put something in the wrong class, but you tell the trademark office what the products and services are, you give them the specimen, they can see what it is, they'll tell you the right class. But sometimes it's filed in such a way that you never, like maybe it's an intent to use application, the trademark office can't figure out what in the world class you should be in, and it just doesn't go through. It gets denied. You don't get to overcome the objection of the class, of the office action that you get from the trademark office. Sometimes it's a specimen issue. Sometimes what happens is you apply for a trademark and the specimen doesn't match the trademark. So I even had this personally with a trademark that I applied for one of my own businesses that doesn't exist anymore, where I filed it as an intent to use application. But then when I actually started using it, I kind of changed it a little bit. And it was a very minor change. It was whether or not the trademark had a space in between the two words or not. And when I actually used it in my business, I changed from what I originally filed. And this happens a lot. Sometimes you may change what the products or services are, so the class doesn't match up. And so it's just a mismatch, and that happens a lot with intent to use applications. But the number one most often reason people get rejected and they're not able to overcome it is likelihood of confusion. Typically what this is that you have some trademark that you think is absolutely great and you were able to get a domain name for it or whatever, and so you think it's going to be fine. And so you file an application with the United States Patent and Trademark Office and they reject it based on these other trademarks. Typically, the reason this happens, usually it's not someone using the exact same thing, even though I've actually seen that. Usually what it is that you have one or two words and they have one of the same words but with another word. The problem is the overlapping words are the words that are the most important. And the other words are kind of generic words like systems or, something that actually, or it's just a generic word for things generally, like the word system, or it's a word like bottle. That's just the generic for the things that you're selling. And so those words aren't very helpful. Those extra words don't really mean anything. Sometimes you have a trademark for word, and someone else has a trademark just on one of the words, the first word. Theirs is broader than yours. So even though they're not the exact same, it's still confusing. All of this is from the perspective of consumers. So this isn't about being fair to you as a business owner. Trademark Office doesn't care. This is about protecting consumers. We want to protect consumers from being confused by people who are having counterfeit products and services. And so it cannot overlap in both the words that are being used or the logo or whatever it is, the trademark, as well as the class, which is the products or services. Now, it doesn't have to be exactly the same. So let's say there's two people who have the exact same trademark. One is been approved and the other one is pending. One of them does life coaching, okay? The other one has a podcast. You might be like, those are very different. Especially life coaching and podcasts, those are not the same. Trademark Office is going to say, well, it's too close because so many life coaches have podcasts and so many podcasts are done by people who are coaches. And so because of that, they overlap a lot and people could be confused. So there's a whole bunch of coordinated classes that overlap according to the Trademark Office. And so you can get rejected based upon something like that. So how do you stop this from happening? You do a search. So often I see people who come to me and they didn't search anything at all except for whether or not they could go to a domain name. Whether or not you can get a domain name, not relevant for here. I mean, it's an important thing for your business, but it's not relevant for the trademark stuff. You need to do a plain old Google search and look for other businesses, and you need to search at the United States Patent and Trademark Office. I've done a video on searching, so I'll link that below or up here or whatever. But you need to do a search. Look not just for someone making using this exact same trademark, but for similar words that sound the same, like synonyms and things. Like, you want something to make sure that there's not something similar in a similar or overlapping class, a coordinated class that is like yours, such that they get first dibs because they were first, because they got the trademark first, they used it in commerce first. Now, this doesn't mean that you can't have two trademarks over the same words if they're in wildly different classes. So if someone has a trademark on podcasting and then someone else is selling car accessories, well, car accessories and podcast usually don't overlap, so they could have the same word for both of them. You see what I'm saying there? So you have to look at those two factors. You have to look at how close the trademarks and how close the classes. Oh, one thing I want to make sure to say is that you can't just be clever about the trademark and get it approved. And what I mean is if someone has a trademark over a word, you can't just change the spelling or put a dash in the middle of it or get all cute and think it's going to overcome it. Nope. If it sounds the same, if it's similar where you can tell, it ain't going to work. So my big advice for you is to do a search before you spend any money on branding, before you get someone to design a logo, any of that stuff. Do a search. You can pay people to do searches. Obviously, you can pay a lawyer to do a search, but there are also companies that just do searches. So if you really want to be extra careful, you can pay someone to do a professional search that will give you a gazillion results you have to comb through, but that can be helpful if you are risk adverse about filing a trademark application and getting rejected for this reason. But to be honest, no search is perfect and it could still happen. Again, this is attorney Elizabeth Potts-Weinstein. If you have any questions about what we talked about today, feel free to ask them in the comments below and I'll try to point you in the right direction. Thumbs up if you found this video helpful. Subscribe for more videos like this. I'll talk to you next time.